Hello guys, I'm Super Ron, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the G-Unit. It has been a hot minute since we've been down here, probably almost a year since there's been any real progress down here. Ever since I bought my house, home renovation Ron has taken over and any work that I have been doing has been at Auto Shack. So many of the newer subscribers may not even know this place existed, but this is where all the older videos took place and all the projects were created. This is the Zafira's first visit, and today we're going to be doing a balancer shaft delete on the engine. So in the bottom of the Z20LETs, there's a couple of balancer shafts which help with vibration and engine harmonics, and there's no real common problems with them, but I think I might have a little trouble with mine. Since doing the rebuild, I've done a couple of 100 miles now, and I've just got this little kind of noise in the sump area. It kind of sounds like a bit of a bottom end rattle, but I know it's not because it's a fully rebuilt engine. We've got new shells in the mains, the big ends, a new oil pump, a new clutch. The only original moving parts in the bottom end are the balancer shafts, and I did put them in the degreaser tank and clean them right out. And sometimes what can happen on high mileage cars, because remember this engine had done 170,000 miles, is sometimes just the grime and the build up of carbon in places stops it rattling, and you clean it all out and it starts rattling. So it's a common mod on the Z20LETs to just delete the balancer shafts, block up the oil ways, put a new girdle in, new oil pickup, new windage tray, and you're done. The problem with these, they're getting so hard to find now. Prices have gone through the roof. They're going for hundreds and hundreds of pounds for the girdle kit. But something I thought about afterwards is why can't you just take the shafts out and leave all the housing and the factory girdle and the factory pickup in there? So I went on the Nevlock forum, spoke to a couple of people, and they said, yeah, that's fine to do. So that is what I'm going to be doing today. It's not too bad to do. Drop the exhaust, drop the sump, which is why I'm doing it here in the G-Unit. I don't really need the Auto Shack ramp, and we can have a look inside at how to delete these balancer shafts. But first, let's have a little look around the G-Unit to see if anything's changed. I'll give you a spoiler, it has not. So we've still got the rear-wheel drive Astra, still up on the spit, still been here for about 12 years, sitting up in the air. It is a project, it's gonna be done, don't worry, be patient. We've got the car I'm best known for back in the day, the J61 RBM Mark III Astra GSI. Had this 2-litre turbo, and this used to rule the forums back in the day. I've got my Vauxhall main dealer sign, and this is what started my YouTube channel, was building this GBS Zero. Doesn't look like a GBS Zero because I've fitted an M&R Vortex body to it. It's a complete hybrid of all sorts of stuff. We've got the C20XE engine, of course, the M&R double bubble, we've got aerial atom clocks, radical harnesses, all sorts of different stuff in this. But this has had to take a pause while I'm doing the house, but it's all still here. You can see the jobs I have popped down that I've filmed over the last year. We've done the rear discs on the RS6, still sitting here. We put the new battery on the RS6, the old one's still sitting here. This is the box that the aircon compressor came in for the Golf when we fixed that. So as you can see, not a lot has moved. Here's the rest of the body for the M&R Vortex. Lots of bits and pieces around, lots of wall art. And before the Zafira episodes, there hasn't been much Vauxhall history, but I'm definitely a Vauxhall guy. We've got our MIG, we've got our TIG, we've got our bandsaw, we've got our lathe. Everything has just been sitting here this whole time. I can't even remember the last thing we were doing on the kit car. I think it was the wiring. Well, no, I think it might have been the engine. All the engine's still sitting here, just as we left it a year ago. The steel rods, the high compression pistons, the high lift cams. And remember, we found the crack in that block, and I think that was the last thing we did do. We've also got the sticker wall with all the YouTubers that I watch, all the magazines, some completely vintage stickers, all the Max Power magazine stickers from back in the day that I saved over the years. Lots and lots. I've still got a big wedge of stickers that I've been collecting over the last year, but the sticker wall is full, so we need to make an extension. We've got the offerings to the God of Speed, all the broken parts and fatalities that I've had over the years, bent rods, bent valves, exploded oil pumps, and we've even now got the Zafira's spark plugs. We've got the original Nova wide arch dash kit sitting up there as well. But our job today is the Zafira. This is what is inside the sump of the Z20LET. We've got these two cogs that turn, and and they've got little offset shafts in each of these, and they spin with the crank. This cog here is directly driven off the crank, and the idea is it just settles down the engine, cancels out harmonics. But in the same engine on the later VXRs and some of the normally aspirated 2 litres, they don't have these. So it doesn't seem any ill effects from removing them. But you can't just unbolt them, because this is the girdle that kind of holds all the crank together. So the kit includes the normally aspirated version of these without the balancer shafts in. And then all you have to do is, these are the oil ways, these 4 holes here that provide oil to the bearings for the balancer shaft. So if you remove these, you've got to plug the oil ways in the main cap, otherwise it'll lose all its oil pressure. The other thing you got to do is, because the oil pickup bolts on there, that won't be there anymore. So you need to get the other oil pickup, and then you need the other windage tray and everything else, and it starts getting an expensive job these days. So what I'm going to do is keep all of this, and just take the shafts out from underneath. Hopefully the rattle will disappear. So let's get this up in the air. We need to drop the exhaust, the sump, and it should be just there in front of us. I've done a few 100 miles in it now, so I'm going to do an oil change as well. I've got a new filter, so let's get it up in the air. No lifts here. First step's going to be exhaust off. Just unbolt that. Next up, I'm going to drain the oil. This will be its first oil change since the full rebuild, so I'm not too worried if there's the odd sparkly bits of the bearings breaking in, as long as there's no big bits that come out. So let's see what it looks like. It's a good sign, no bits of metal. And now the sump. Oh yeah, oil level. Well, there's no bits in the sump, always a good sign. Let's get this clip off. So it looks like drive shaft can stay in place, downpipe can stay in place. It looks like I'm going to have to drop the oil feed to the turbo, because it covers up those bolts and you won't be able to slide it down. So I'll just release the oil turbo feed. That's not too bad to do, just a bolt there and the union on the back. I should be able to get to everything to drop this second sump. And if you've ever wondered where your dipstick goes, there's the end of it sitting in the sump. I've got all the bolts out, but a bit of a design flaw. Doesn't seem like you can get it past the subframe. It's hitting on the subframe before it clears the oil pickup tube. I don't know whether I have to raise the engine a little bit just to slide it out, or unbolt the pickup tube from there. I'll have a little tinker. Gonna go for trying to jack up the engine a bit. Hopefully that'll give us enough clearance. I can get to the oil pickup pipes now though, so I might just hook it off there. Must be an easier way to do this. That's got it. So I just engine crane this engine mount up, released it from the body. So now the engine is tilting up and I should be able to get the sump out. So now, with the engine up away from the subframe, it should come out. That's the way to do it. Right, so now we can get the oil pickup off and get this balancer shaft out.
And we're out. There's our turbo oil feed. Here's the strainer. All nice and clean, no bits in there. And here is the balancer shaft, just exactly the same as that one. This one touches the crankshaft, spins, and that spins the other one. There you go. I think that's the noise I was hearing. Don't know if you can hear it. In the sump. So these aren't known for going bad. They had plenty of oil in it because it was full of oil when I just dropped it. I think it's just because when I degreased the whole thing, there we go, that's the noise I was hearing. That is good news. That means it's not the engine, it was this. So now on here, there's a couple of circlips and then the shafts should come out. We better drain it a bit more of oil first. Alright, so I reckon we've got to get these covers off because then it can slide out the end. Might need to take the windage tray off. Oh, and there they are. This other one off. Definitely some play in them. Alright, let's get these circlips off the other end. One. Two. Little thrush washers. Ah, I see. Got to take this one out because the cogs are hitting on this. So just flip it over. Got to get these ones out. How are you supposed to get them off the cog? Maybe it needs a bigger whack. That's got it. Voila! And that got them off. They were just a press fit on those shafts, so they tapped out okay. Looks like this one's got some writing on it. Must be from the factory. It's in pen, not sure what that is. But here are the counterbalances. As you can see, they're very one-sided. So as they go around, they're supposed to balance out vibrations and stuff. But you can see, I think we found our problem. This is where the bearing runs, just like a crankshaft here and here. And as you go round, see it suddenly gets very shiny on this side. But this side's hardly worn. And that's just because there's a good one. You can see where it changes from shiny to not worn. So the shiny side is the worn side. And it must have been, it was just holding itself together. See, there's still quite a lot of oily deposits on there. And when I cleaned it and flushed it all out, that's gone. But you can see the two halves, we've got average wear, a lot of wear. And these just sit a bit like a crankshaft. They've just got shells in there, which is like an old American V8 camshaft where they slot through. So now we've got our balancer shaft delete kit. So we can put these windage trays back on and we have got it there. It doesn't matter that that bit's in the middle, still going to do its job, and saved ourselves 250 quid. Now, like I say, these are just kind of bushes, bearings, and they go on there, and they are oil fed through 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. So what would happen if we just put this back together, the oil would come out of the crank, straight through there, straight into the sump, and it wouldn't have any oil pressure anywhere else. So part of doing this delete mod is we have to plug these oilways in the block itself. The oilways come through actually part of the main caps of the crank. So we've got a bolt hole in the middle and then 2 oilways. So we've got to drill and tap these and put some grub screws in. And because it's on the caps, we can unbolt it and do it on the bench. So let's get these two main caps off, drill and tap, and then we'll Loctite the bungs in. Get a good chance to check out the new shells as well. They all look fine. So now we've got to drill and tap these oilways. Here's the main cap all off, and these are the little grub screws that I'm going to be using. Just normal little M8 grub screws. So we've got to drill these out to 6.8mm. I looked on the R&D page and they got a little guide for this, and they say drill down about 13-14mm and tap that far so you're not going all the way through. So we've got our M8 taps. So we'll drill, tap, and then we'll Loctite these in, and that will block off the oilway. So I've got a 6.8mm drill bit, which is the drill size for tapping M8. We put our cap in there, and I've put a bit of tape 14mm up so I know how far to drill. I'll stop when I get to the tape. Let's give it a go. Oil. Now let's get these tapped out. And here we have some really nice threads cut. So it's just like the middle one. There's a little bit of a burr on the top, so I think I might just countersink it like that middle one, just to take that burr off. These caps are ready to go. And now these grub screws should go in. They'll go about halfway down to where we drilled. Perfect. So I'm going to Loctite these in just for a bit of a belt and braces job. And most people say they peen over, which means you just whack the thread just so they can't come out. I think these caps are done. They've come out really, really nice. All the threads are perfect. So we'll Loctite these in, and then we can start reassembly. And just looking in the bearings for the balancer shaft, see they're not in great shape. These are the ones that were where we saw the wear earlier. So I'm pretty happy that this is our likely cause. And got everything all cleaned up, spotless. So all of these will not be returning. All we need is the housing and the windish tray. Got always blocked, so they're done up super tight with Loctite, and I've peened the threads over down just above, so there's no chance in a million years that they're ever going to come out. So now we can start the reassembly. It's got the main bearings all back in, all cleaned, oiled. Just double check the crank, and that's all looking perfect. And this is the big cog that is now redundant. That's just going to be spinning. That used to run the balancer shafts, but now it's going to be all on its own. So we'll get these mains all back in. And that's the mains all on, torqued back up. They're 50 Newton meters, then 45 degrees, and then another 15 degrees. Just got all the faces cleaned up. So now I think we can put this empty balancer shaft back on. It does normally have this gasket between, which is for the oilways, so it doesn't leak through. So in theory, we don't need this on there anymore. But I think I am still just going to fit it, just because that's barely even a millimetre. But because the oil pickup bolts to it, that might just put it a little bit different angle. So it might be fine without it. But I think I'm, just for the sake of it, going to fit it back on. So let's get these windage trays bolted back on. So that's all the windage trays back on. So now let's put this empty housing back in.
all back on. They were 20 Newton meters and then 45 degrees on all the girdle bolts, and a little baby 8 Newton meters for the oil pump. So now we can get the sumps cleaned up and put back on.
Got the sump all cleaned out and spotless. I didn't think to get new gaskets, so I'm just going to have to re-glue these ones. Hopefully they'll be all right. And then we can get the sump back on. But first off, remember, we need to jack up the engine. Right, and the lower half. Stupid idea with these level plugs. That's in. Done. And a new drain plug. All right, let's get this turbo oil feed back on around this side. And a new oil filter as well. All over the subframe. Nice one, Vauxhall. I've just let the oil filter all drain out. Nothing untoward in there, no sparkly bits. Just a little murky like the oil that came out. So I don't think we've got any bearing problem. I don't think that's the knocking noise. I think it is down to these worn shafts, because you can actually, the grooves catch your nail. So hopefully that's where the problem is. All the oil looks a-okay. That's oil line all on. Level sensor connected, exhaust all back on. I'm out of bolts, so I think we are all back together. Let's get it back down on the floor and get it filled up. So it's the next day. I just let all that sealer go off completely overnight. So now let's fill it up with oil. So I'm just going to disconnect the crank sensor, because we've had quite a few oil galleries and a new filter. So I can turn it over without it starting. Oil pressure light off. Check Mr. Dippy. Needs some more now. 4.5 litres, that's what it should take. Yep. So far, so good. Oh, let's get some good luck. All right, let's go for it. That all seems a-okay. So I think that's going to wrap this episode up. We're all up and running and all the oil has stayed in, so that's a good start. So hopefully this has solved my knocking problem when it's cold. I wish I knew it was this easy when I had the engine out and upside down, because that would have been so much easier than laying on my back, getting covered in oil, getting dripped on. But at the time, I just didn't want to spend the 250 quid for something that isn't normally a problem. But I think what's happened is so high mileage and it's just worn out, and all the build-up of oil deposits was just keeping it quiet, and then when I washed all that away, there's just that little bit of play. So hopefully this has given you some ideas of how to do it for free. It's a bit daunting taking the main caps off, but with the engine just sitting still, that's fine. Just to drop those caps off and leave the crank in there. The hardest job of this was getting the sump out between that subframe, but once I discovered that you just needed to lift the engine up a little bit, I use the engine crane for this, but you could probably put a bar across and just lift the engine up from that side with a ratchet strap or something that'd do just the same job. And as soon as I lifted the engine up, sump went straight in. So I'll definitely be doing that if I ever have to investigate in there again. I hope some of you have found this video super helpful, so make sure you give it a like and make sure you subscribe, because we've still got loads of work to go on the Zafira. Now I've got the mechanicals all sorted, we're going to be moving on to the bodywork, but it's going to be interesting to see if this does make any difference, because with those counterbalances it's quite a lot of rotating mass and it's uneven, so it takes even more power consumption to turn them, to see if it actually does make any difference to performance. But until next time, make sure you have fun.